Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Episode 2 of Paul and Vince's excellent Hobby Time Adventure and Painting Challenge series, name still pending. But somewhere in there is probably a name. How you doing today, Paul?
Good. How are you, man?
Well, not bad, brother. You're looking much better than you were during your short video at the end of last week during the GT. You don't look dead.
On the mend. On the mend. I literally thought I was going to die, but we're pushing through.
Well, that's good. It would have been a shame to lose you before episode 2. It'd really be hard to recast you so early in the series.
Yeah, right. But actually, that might be the best time, right? You got the person just out before, premiere, and then we just switch them out. No one notices.
Sure, yeah, it's like, oh, I see. It's like a pilot change, right? Where you've got like a
Yeah,
particular actor for the pilot, but they don't work out. All right.
yeah. You can always just play it off. I was asking too much. Contract negotiations didn't work out.
Absolutely. Yeah, he wanted to, like, he thought he was really, important to the show. He wanted a lot of money. Had to get rid of him. I think it was because, my theory on the whole thing is that you took ogres to that tournament. And so Clan Pestilence agents infiltrated and gave you the red pox. I think that's clearly what happened.
Probably infiltrating that Mexican place I went to.
Well, where else would they infiltrate from? I mean, that seems really obvious to me.
Oh, good.
All right. So, yeah, let's talk about what are we doing and what did we do for last week. So obviously what we're doing is this is our painting sort of challenge and adventure time, and we're calling that rather than tutorial. I'm staying away from that word because it's really not tutorial. I mean, we're going to give you tips and stuff like that. But, the reality is I'm not a golden demon winner. I feel like I'm a pretty adept painter, but the reality is I look at pieces all the time that I think, my God, I have so far to go. And so this show is just a continuation of that. It's just a journey. We want to challenge ourselves and bring you along with us and, just try stuff out and fail. So you can expect lots of that. If you're looking for a painting show where people aren't afraid to fail, probably often, this is the show for you.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that is you hit the nail on the head on that one, Vince. I think that we're not here to tell you how it's done. We're here to share our experiences and tell you how we do it. So, I mean, we'll definitely give you some step by step on what we did, if that helps you out. And if you think that we're complete idiots, that's fine too, and tell us how to improve. We would also love that. So, anything goes here. We're just some guys painting some minis.
There you go. That's exactly right. I think that is a really good point. We want you to share too and come along with us. So when we set up these challenges, feel free to participate in them yourself. If you happen to be working on a fig and it ties in well with the challenge, hey, paint it up, send us a photo, and we'll talk about it in the show. Give us a short description of what you did. If you want, we'll even have you on the show. Hey, that's fine. We don't mind at all. We'd love to have you on. And we'd love to share with the community what they're doing and their efforts and challenges and successes and sometimes failures. So speaking of challenge, our first challenge that we determined last week was or 2 weeks ago, I guess, because the show will be bi-weekly, is faces, painting faces. Often a item
Yes,
of a
faces
lot
and
of,
eyes, I believe.
yes, faces and eyes. That's right. Yeah, very good. Thank you.
So the whole deal.
Yeah, often an item of much contestation. I don't know, however you say that. It's a challenging thing. And it's funny too, because I remember there's like for painting scores at tournaments, I know that the judges have like everybody's familiar with like the spectacles, testicles, wallet, and watch sign of the cross thing. Maybe you grew up Catholic like I did, but there's bases, faces, banners, and shields, right? Those are your 4 things for painting score at a tournament. If you can nail those 4 things, bases, faces, banners, and shields, that's really what people see when they look at your model.
And there's a lot of emphasis, especially on the eyes, right? I mean, you can do a nice face, have it dry brush looking pretty, and if you don't pick out the eyes, a lot of people will consider that not done, and you will get dinged very hard. So certainly something to pay attention to in your tournament paid scores.
Absolutely. Yeah. it's and the real challenge with it is, I mean, I think when they cast some of these models, I don't think they honestly even intend for the eyes to be painted. I think of like some of the newer wood elves and stuff, like their little eye slits, if anything, are so small, and those guys are giving you like the 1,000-yard squinty, old west stare. It's like they're trying to make it difficult on you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right, so let's review what we did for the week there, for the 2 weeks, whatever. Lock up the screen here. This is always a fun thing. You can do it.
Please, Vince, go ahead and share with us the plethora of miniatures you painted. So, in the audience, you will quickly notice that Vince has the problem with the word "a model." Apparently, it is a contest of, let's see how many models I can paint beautifully at once.
Hey, look, I paint a lot of stuff. The faces was the challenge. I thought, I had plenty of models I wanted to paint, so there we go. I painted several of them.
And I'm sure no one's going to punish you for being overzealous. I'm just over here bitter because I barely didn't finish one. I finished a face.
Hey, that's all right. The challenge was a face, so you're good.
Emphasis on a.
Always a challenging thing for my terrible computer here. There we go. Come on. There it is. All right. Can you see my screen there?
Yep.
All right. So this was the surprise fig. Oh, I should have. Wait, we'll wait on that. Let's go to yours. Or not. That's fine. Whatever. It's in here. We'll get there. All right. So this was what I didn't share with the PMP. So I got the Bowedeman, I guess is how you say it. Bowedeman. He's the guy who does the pinup girls. They did a range of miniatures. And so this was the cosmonaut girl. So I thought she would be fun to paint up. I'd been looking for an excuse to paint her. And so yeah, this is her. And
really dig the pink. So I really like the flesh tone there. It looks like you really pulled out the lips. How do you get around on the eyes and the lips there?
Yeah, so with the lips, and like it's almost impossible to see in the picture just because it's, there is a limitation even to what cameras and zoom can do. But there's a little bit of eye shade there too, around on the flesh. And so I think one of the keys there is you want to really, people when they try to paint lips or do eyeshadow, I think they try to just put paint on, right? Like I am going to take a color, your lips are a color, and I will just put that color on. And I think that's honestly not the right way to go. So what you do is you take the hue you want. Well, so in this case, the lips, I wanted, this sort of pinkish reddish tone. So I took a sort of magenta-y color. And I mixed it with some flesh tone because you always want the hint of that flesh. Your lips are a fleshy thing. They're part of your skin. And you thin it down quite a bit, which will tie into something we talk about later. And you just do some real simple little glazes over those lips. And that lets you then slowly build up the lips. And it doesn't just create this stark contrast of like face, dark red lips. And same thing for eyeshadow, you just do less glazes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like that. And you definitely hit on, you absolutely need that bit of flesh color in there with the lips. If you just stick some red on there, it's going to look like you just stuck some red on there. It's not going to look natural. So warming it up, you can get away with a little bit brighter if you're doing like lipstick type deal. But that is something very specific that often does not apply to a Warhammer miniature. But indeed, I think even building that up from a flesh tone to very, very, very little in thin amounts of pure paint.
Absolutely. And yeah, I love this fig, the whole Bowedeman miniatures, which, I mean, What's nice about them is this is their 32 mil range, which is actually fairly small. They're legitimately the size of a Warhammer mini, since Warhammer minis are big heroic scale 28 millimeter. But they also make 54 millimeter ranges. So if you're the type of painter that just likes to paint some beautiful figs, not necessarily for any purpose, they're a great line of minis. I highly recommend them. They're really cool. I'm honestly tempted to get a few of them because they're all in like sort of sexy pinup girl positions. And as you can see, like she was separate from Sputnik there, which that's another thing. Just a quick aside. That is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever painted, because it's Sputnik is what she's writing. And I went and looked at Sputnik to see what it looked like, and it's just silver. It was nothing. It was literally just a silver bull. And I'm like, oh, all right.
Not much exciting there.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with that. But the Great Row minis, and I was thinking about using them since they're all laying around in pinup girl positions as my blood crushers for my all-female corn army. I think that'd be pretty funny.
Very nice.
All right, so these are all mixed up, and I don't know why. So I'm going to kind of skip around here. Sorry. There we go. Let's go to that one. Okay. There we go. All right. Can you see Calidia okay there?
Yep, we're good.
All right. So this is High Queen Calidia, who, let's ignore the cloak color for a moment, because that was an experiment that I'm not totally pleased with. And obviously the trick with Calidia is she has half of a sort of death mask face and half of a skull, right? And this really gets into, this is exactly what you were talking about before the show. Like, as I zoom in here, I'm like, oh God. Yeah, you know, like you think you paint something that looks good, then you zoom way in and you're like, oh boy. Honestly, I consider her, it's a shame too, because she's one of my favorite figs. I took a long time on her. I did go for exaggerated things like her lips being the purple and stuff, because it's supposed to be a mask that she has on, you know, or at least that's how I perceive it to be. I don't think that's a real face. I don't know. And I really consider this fig a failure. And like I was trying interesting things with like the purple, and that eye is a different color. It gets lost in the picture, but I just consider her, it's a shame too, because she's one of my favorites, but just the color palette of her, there's that side of her face. I just don't like how she came out. And there's the skeleton side of her face, which honestly is the only side I think turned out okay. It looks cracked and scully and horrible, which is how it should look.
It seems like on the miniature, I mean, it's really hard with some of these photographs to see the eyes pop. You know what I mean? And I think that's one aspect that I'm having trouble with, is that I feel like the eyes aren't really jumping out at me. And on a miniature, like a Collider or something that's an undead, I feel like there has to be some aspect of the miniature that feels alive in terms of an evil aura. And the eyes open up an opportunity to do that if you want to do some, you know, object source lighting or some glowing effect with the eyes, or, you know, other aspects like the staff or something like that. But in terms of this challenge, I feel like the eyes could pop a little more in a creative way.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, and it's a shame too, because this is the second one I painted and I managed to not improve, so that was even more depressing. And she's also one of my favorite characters and figures. But I don't like my color scheme. I don't like the palette in the end. Now let me say this. I think part of the challenge here was that this was the fine cast version.
Okay.
And that her face was just a mess in that fine cast. So like
sometimes that just does it, right?
Yeah, she has pock marks on her chin and stuff, so that's screwing up her face. Like where, you know, the fine cast will have those like just pocks missing out of it, like holes in the cast. Yeah, she has a couple of those. So I think my other piece of advice here to people would be avoid the fine cast figures that have really fine facial details, because I get that a lot with those little pock marks in them. I'm probably going to get a third Calidia just because I'm going to do this again and get it right, and I'm going to try to pick up a metal one.
I would almost consider reducing the color palette even more on a model such as this. I've seen a lot of very cool, sort of cloth and gold type deals. Almost primarily cloth and gold was with a very splash bright color in there. Sometimes a blue if you're going for like a lighter effect, or a red to get that more menacing effect. Can be kind of cool.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot to be said for painting in sort of monotone, right? And just using the little bits of color. If you think of like, I'm sure everybody's seen like the artsy pictures that are mostly in black and white with one thing in color, right? Or like getting a movie Pleasantville, how much the one thing in color on the paint attracts your eye. So you can really use those kind of tricks to even when painting figures, to direct people's eyes. So I'm going to say for this fig, I failed this part of the challenge with her. I'm going to give myself a failing grade on this one. What were you going to say? I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, I almost actually like looking at the fig, kind of just playing. I mean, it's a nicely painted fig, Vince. I mean, I think it just comes out to one of those things where it's, you paint for a while and you're just unpleased with what you achieve. But I actually like the blue, the purple, and the green together. I actually think, I'm not sure, I haven't looked at this model closely. What is the pinkish red vine? Is that a snake, or is that a...
Yeah, those are snakes, yeah.
Okay. I almost think that is what it is that is clashing on the color palette. I don't know. In the photo, they're coming off almost pinkish, and I feel like that's just sort of clashing with the overall feel, because you have the purple and the green. I think that those go really, really well. So maybe playing with that color too.
Yeah, agreed. I didn't feel like, it's funny. I wanted them to stand out, and then I painted it, and I was like, that stands out way too much. Like, there's contrast, and then there's bad contrast, right? And yeah, that's bad. But hey, lessons learned. There was things I liked. I like the snake. I think he looks cool. I'm happy with how
he looks very cool. Especially
it looks like a legitimate real snake to me. I tried a new little scale technique there. I was happy with that. But hey, whatever. Overall, D-. We're not getting in college on these grades.
We're also getting highly digressing off the topic of faces, but that's fine. That's fine.
There you go. Fair enough. Let's get back to faces. There's just another view. You can kind of see the slight color hue on the cosmonaut girl's eye there. Just very slight. Let's move on to, where's he at? There he is. Cetra, the King of Kings. This guy, I am much more happy with how he came out.
Yes, he looks very imposing. Let's get up on that face. That looks very dynamic. There you go. There's a pretty one.
Yeah. His face I was much more happy with. Went for the gray tone skin because I wanted him to really look old and ragged. He's freaking ancient. And again, the eyes. So what I did for those was just actually started with pure white, which I wouldn't normally do with eyes. But this guy's undead, and like you said, it's a chance to make it pop. And then I actually covered that with just a light coat of vanillic oxide, and then touched that to the bones of his eye ridge bones, your skull bones, whatever those are called. I don't know. And then went back and just did a slight sheen of white across the top of the eye, over top of the oxide.
So it was a white base, and then a sort of glazed wash over the top, and then a retouching?
That's correct.
Very nice. And I like that technique a lot. It usually kind of fills in around the eye and completes it. Usually just a dab itself, which is finishing, right? If you're talking about rank and file models, just dabbing, the eye makes it look complete from a distance, but really doing the extra, going the extra mile is the wash, and then the extra dab to kind of fill it in. And I really love the mouth and the teeth here. The mouth and the teeth really bring it out.
Yeah.
Did you do anything special on there, or was that just some excellent paint placement on the teeth?
Just it's pretty like dark. I went for like a very dark shade of gray to keep it in the same palette inside, right? Like the inside of his flesh. And that's part of the key. Like when you do the inside of mouths, I think is a good statement, even though this guy's undead. The key is you want to stay in the same color range, right? So you shouldn't just like go if you ever have a chance to paint inside a mouth, you shouldn't just go like pink or something like that. It should again be like a darker ruddy flesh tony color, because the inside of your mouth has those same sorts of flesh tones in it, right? And so in this, I just applied the same lesson. So if his outer skin is a lighter gray, his inner mouth should be a darker gray, right? And then the teeth are just double shade of like bone and then ivory over top.
Very nice. A lot of times, like you just said, keeping the tone the same. A lot of times, what I'll do is mix sort of the undertone of whatever flesh color I've done, so the darker tone, and then mix that maybe 50-50 with a purple wash, and sort of go into the inside of the mouth, and then do sort of a lighter glaze over the top of that once that dries out of a more fleshy tone, and then actually a deeper red wash, and it kind of gets that dark color, but also that fleshy, cool color, and it kind of, you know, brings that pinkish purple color of your gut, but doesn't make it look unnatural. It doesn't just look like a red and purple on there. Keeps that flesh hue.
I like that. That's a great tip. Yeah, the purple wash, which is what, Drakenhof Nightshade is, or no, Druchii Violet. Sorry. Yeah, Druchii Violet and Carrion Crimson. That dark red and that dark purple wash can really be your friend when dealing with inside mouth, internal organs, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think that you did a really excellent job with the lighting here on the face too. I mean, all the cheekbones are pulled out, and the eyes look great, and ridge looks great, and it's just totally adding to the figure. I mean, he looks like he's angry.
Oh, the King of Kings is rarely happy.
So I'm gonna go out and give you a passing grade on this one, Vince. This one looks great.
Yeah, I was much happier with this one for sure. All right, let's see. Apparently, it's just gonna cycle through mine here. Sorry, that's not really my intention, but like whatever. We'll save the best for last. That's why we're gonna do Paul's last.
I don't know about
that. So here we just got nice simple face, nothing too big going on, but it was, you know, straight human face again, working with the flesh tones, pulling out the eyes. Again, pretty standard stuff as to what we said here every time. You know, it's just, I think one of the things I want to say here is if you're going to do eyebrows, you need to be very careful. And the same lessons I said with lips are appropriate for eyebrows. If you take some dark brown paint and just draw it across the ridgeline, it's going to look like one of those women who overdraws their eyelashes with a makeup pencil, right?
Absolutely, it's gonna look fake.
Yeah, because even though when you think of your eyebrows, you think of them as sort of this solid brown thing, or blonde thing, or whatever color hair eyebrow you happen to have, that's not really what they are, right? They're a bunch of little follicles. It's not individual little, or it's not just one line. And so that same lesson from before of mixing in the flesh tone to just sort of do a very light, thin eyebrow. And honestly, when you're doing it, you want to try to trace just that ridge line. Use the same detail brush you're using for your eyeball, because you just want it to be a very light touch with it to accentuate the ridge. You don't want to go farther than that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would say to that. I think everything else in this guy we've already covered on previous ones. No, okay. All right, you're going to be a pain here. All right, let's do this. There we go. Goblin. Here we go, Paul. This is your boy. You want to start with this one or the next one?
Is that the zoomed in or zoomed out? I don't remember.
This is the zoomed in.
All right, zoomed in. So I chose to do a goblin. I was looking for something that had a full face deal going on, and I always liked this little figure. And obviously he's one of the nice new little plastic clam packs, and I think GW has done a phenomenal job with those guys. They're always high on detail and, you know, low on fuss. They always got a really well cast and really smooth. So I definitely was excited to get into this guy. Obviously he is not finished. I just went for the face, so the face is finished. And what you'll hopefully see here is standard flesh tone type deal in terms of orcs and goblins. I went for more of a yellowy green type thing. And what that is basically a picked up whatever my green was, and sort of a bonish green type color to act as highlighting, kind of base coated. And then I did a very, very liberal wash and then picked out what I wanted with the highlights, brought it all the way back up, and then did a glaze type wash over the top to make it a yellowy tone and sort of tie everything together. Now here, I think it's important to note basically what I added to the figure was eyes. The ears are a slightly different color as the lips are. And then I actually went back and added, after I finished the face, the nose a different color. And if you'll look around at some very nice miniatures, you'll notice that the face usually in a lot of skin tones will incorporate a different hue. And I felt like with the nose not being a different color, it was actually just sort of a boring face. It didn't really pop quite as much. And so what the ears and the nose are, the ears were a little bit more challenging, was a dark flesh tone. These are actually human flesh tones that I kind of glazed and washed over. So it was a darker flesh tone. And then I washed with purple. Then I picked out the flesh tone again, and then washed with Reichman flesh shade, and then picked out the flesh tone again, washed again, and then did a final mix of very, very little Reichman flesh shade with a light flesh tone color, and then picked out the ear that way. The lips, so the way I do lips, and I think it tends to work, is basically a similar way that Vince does. I take that flesh tone, go over it very lightly of my base color with a lot showing through on my wash, and then I do a mix and highlight on the lip, and then I actually take vertical brush strokes along the lip of a lighter color than what I have, and then I do a final wash. And the reason for the vertical strokes, as thin as you can get them, is actually to give some texture and kind of crackness to the lip. I find that sort of makes it look a little more natural for me and a little less painted. If you don't like that, you don't like that. But for me, it tends to look a little bit nicer from a little bit of ways away. In terms of the eyes, so the eyes are sort of a invested affair. There's actually a little bit of blue, of actually greenish blue. There's a turquoise around the outer of the eye, and that was actually the last step. But the inside of the eye is a red dot, and then I wash with purple to get the outline of the eye, so it makes that really dark contrast pop. I redot with red, and then I actually dot with white. And to do that, and then that extra dot of white is actually to pick out when I go through and do a small dot of orange, a small dot of yellow, and then a final smallest dot of white again. And I find that makes the transition through the eye more drastic, and it kind of makes it look like he is staring off angrily. So a fair amount of time invested in the face, but in a model like this, I think the face draws a lot of attention. So if you're going for that, that's kind of what I did, and hopefully we'll talk about that in a second. But I'm going to go back through when this model is complete, and I'll do a little video that Vince will add and tag on, and we'll sort of compare and contrast what way we like viewing the miniatures. But we'll get to that in just a little bit. Vince, you want to go to the next picture for me?
Absolutely. Oh, hey. My Goblin 2. There we go.
So as Vince was talking about, it's a little hard to see. Oh, there we go. It's not too bad. But in the zoomed up thing, you can kind of still see a little bit of brush strokes and things like that. But sort of from the 12 inches to 8 inches away, when you're kind of holding up the mini, looking at it comfortably, I think that it comes out very nicely. You can still try and still kind of pick out the eyes from this distance. They still look sort of menacing. The nose sort of picks out a little bit of contrast from the rest of the face, makes the whole miniature kind of, or the whole face kind of pop out there. I'm pretty happy with how the face turned out. We'll see how the whole miniature turns out. Things that I didn't like, yeah, I don't know. The skin tone's all right. I think that the skin tone, the green skin tone I ended up with was not terribly dramatic, and it's not overly original. So it didn't make me the happiest. I almost kind of wanted to go with more of a earthy brown sort of skin tone to make him look a little more aged, and I think that usually works in terms of orcs and goblins. But He's all right. I'm more satisfied than dissatisfied with this guy in the moment. So, what are your thoughts, Vince?
I love this guy. This is fantastic work. I know that this isn't part of it, but if the challenge were between the two of us, I would vote for you and you win this week. Absolutely. This is a super dynamic fig. I love the face. He's an awesome palette to work with, right? Because he has these big exaggerated ridge lines under his eyes, his big lips that are, like with the deep divots. You're absolutely right. Those clam pack characters, I mean, yeah, they might be a little expensive, but this level of detail is what you're paying for, right? I mean, it's just an amazingly modeled fig, and you just did a fantastic job at capturing it. I love the hue transitions. I love the little bits of brown you're using on the brow line there. I love the color transitions, and the nose was pure genius. I absolutely agree with you. Like, if that nose had been green, or into a sort of maybe like probably the transition for the nose would be out to like a yellowish thing, much like the eye line, right? The eyebrow line. And that would have been fine. There would be nothing wrong with that. It would be a great looking model still. But that little clever turn of having it go into like the almost drunk man goblin nose, huey normal flesh tone, is just a brilliant turn. And I love it. Yeah, like absolutely, my vote would be for you.
So kind.
I have literally no critiques for this. It's great.
Okay. So basically, what I was getting at earlier, for those following the show, is we're sort of still trying to feel out what is the best way to display what we did, and I think what we're sort of playing between is what I'm going to do is, after this, when I actually finish this figure, I'm going to put up a sort of slideshow that I talk out over more like a battle report type step by step what's going on. Hopefully they will be kind of short, in the order of 4 to 8 minutes or so. And what I was thinking is it's more work for us, but if you can see it better and you guys like it better, we're willing to possibly do this. We will record the beginning of the show, stitch it together with both Vince and mine's videos of what we did, and then go and finish the show and stitch that whole thing together into a series. However, that does mean that it can't be live. I don't know if many of you care about that, but we will see. So I will look for that on Vince's channel. I think I'm going to give that to Vince, and he can put it up on his, since this was his hosting week. So we'll hopefully get feedback on that. And if you guys have a preference, if you guys feel like you couldn't see anything on these slideshows, let us know, and we'll try something different.
Exactly.
And
it's a community project, and we want to make sure that we, we're actually, there we go, back to us, that we are, giving you guys what you want, and delivering this content in the best way possible. So if the slideshow works for you, hey, tell us that. If you'd rather see it in a video format, tell us that. If you don't mind it being separate, or, we attach a video to the bottom of the models on a slideshow thing, we can do that too. Whatever everybody likes, I think, is the answer. All right. There we go. Now we're back to regular. So, how do you feel overall about the challenge this week? You feel good about it? Like that was a good endeavor? Do you feel like you learned something?
So honestly, I do feel like I learned something. I spent a lot of time kind of digging around, thinking about how to make the face pop. Like I said, the nose was an additional thing. A lot of times I had spent with the ears. I kind of was looking at it and just, I looked through a lot of minis, a lot of faces, just looking for a lot of source material on sites like Cool Mini, and was looking around. And if you look at all the top painters, you look at the faces of those minis, they're just very dynamic, and they have a lot of transitions and different colors in there to make them look, I guess, lifelike is not the right word, because a lot of times you're talking about, Goblin or something, but more animated, I think is the proper word, is what I'm looking for. They just look more dynamic in terms of that. And I think that adding that to your miniature and kind of knowing where to put that, I think it was fun trying to incorporate that into a face. So I do feel like it was a nice exercise in terms of non-human faces and how to make them look a little more animated than just single tone.
Yeah, agreed. For me, it was, I'm honestly glad that I failed on one of my favorite figs, because it made me think deeply about how I'm painting those and about the type of mini that I'm getting and all sorts of stuff. So it's good to fail. And I'm also happy that I managed to paint another fig that I am very happy with well in an off flesh tone. And while looking at yours made me think like, could I have done even a more crazy color transition somewhere on Cetra's face? You know, did I miss an opportunity there to have something brighter in place or stand outish? So that's definitely good. I feel like that was a very positive challenge overall and gave me a lot for the future as I move forward with faces and eyes.
Definitely.
All right, and we may come back to eyes again in the future in another way, just because those, those were all very small and you can't do much with the eye there except sort of, have very slight color. Even when you go through a lot of steps to have different things, you can't really see the detail. So maybe sometime in the future we'll pick a big fig where it has like, significant eyeballs on it, something in a large size, and we'll talk about how to do larger, more detailed eyes when you have a lot of space to work with.
Absolutely.
Because in those minis, you need to treat the eye much differently if you're painting something, the size of a giant, where his eyeball is, the size of a normal figure's half their face. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. So let's move on to the middle section of the show here. Let's talk about our painting tip for the week. Painting tip.
I feel like it's like painting tip.
That's right. Painting tips. No. It's got to be live, so there you go. Like that's what you get, folks. You get us singing, so I hope you like it. I think we wanted to talk about thinning paint this week, right?
Yes, we do, and this is a very important one.
Yeah, I mean, in case it wasn't obvious from working with the faces, I think this is well timed up to follow on the heels of faces. If you aren't significantly thinning your paints and you try to go in and paint a face in detail, you will fail at it. Because faces require, that amount of small detail requires very thin glaze type paints for you to work with and not get glopped on paint. Everybody says thin your paints, but what the heck does that mean? What does thinning your paint actually mean? And so that's what we're going to kind of talk about, just how we thin our paints. And how thin do you go? So I'll jump on here, Paul, first, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, go for it.
Talk about. So let me start out by saying thinning paints. All right, so there's a lot of different kinds of paints that you might work with. So here, let me grab just two little simple ones and hold them up here. So one of these is just a straight model color from Vallejo, and one of these is Game Air, right? Now, this is for airbrush, so it's already more thin than this one. Right? If you're working with Citadel paints, they have their own natural thinning to them. If you have one that says base and one that says layer, the difference between that is the base is a much thicker paint. It's meant to ideally be a base coat, and the layer one is thinner. I find them both to be way too thick to be of any value, and I would still thin those and recommend you do the same. I don't usually work with Citadel paints at all because I find paint pots to be terrible. When you're thinning paints, dropper bottles, for my money, are the way to go. Then part of the trick here is know your paint. So this red, it's also Game Air, but the reality is this red is just a much thicker color than this orange. This orange, when you bring it out of the bottle, it just, for whatever reason, it is a thinner paint. So working with the paints you're going to get a sense of how thick they are.
And let me just jump in super quick with what we're talking about, knowing the paints.
Yes.
What I was digging around back here. So I have 6 common brands of paint here lined up. From what I usually find is the thickest and needing the most thinning, which is some of the tips that we'll give you next on how to thin those. But basically, when I go through these brands, GW, as you just said, is one of the thickest paints, needs the most thinning. You definitely need to spend time thinning. If you are not thinning this paint, you are getting insanely thick coats, and it's going to be very, very challenging for you to improve as a painter in terms of layering and glazing and things like that. Vallejo, standard Vallejo. This is a fantastic paint. There's nothing wrong with this paint. It's just a very, very hardy paint, I find, and it actually is meant to be heavily thinned, and it takes thinning very well.
And part of that, if I might just say one quick thing, part of that is because Vallejo paints are actually an acrylic vinyl paint. and so they're meant to be flexible, and because of that, they're naturally thicker, as opposed to simply acrylic paint.
So then I have war paint, which I don't have a lot of, but some people may use it. It's a little bit thicker. It's on the order of probably in between Vallejo and my next one, Reaper. Reaper I find is much thinner than Vallejo, needs much less thinning. It takes thinning pretty well, but I would say probably half as much thinning as you need with Vallejo, if not less than that. Next I have Minotaur. If you guys pick this up, I do like this paint set. It's another airbrush paint set. However, why it's up here is if they're thin to an airbrush level, they're a little bit less thin than Game Air, so they do need a little bit of thinning. But I find that this paint range is extremely variable. I have pulled out some that are as thick as almost Vallejo, and then some that are thinner than Game Air. So there's a lot of variability in this range. I put it here because it is an airbrush paint, but that one is another one of know your paints, because I think that they're mixing, their paint mixing and their production line is a little bit off still because they're a newer brand. And then last but not least, again, your Game Air. These are almost ready to go. I would thin these probably, I would thin them about half as much as I would thin Reaper. They are literally maybe just a wipe on your wet palette away from being ready to go.
I love it. Yeah, that's perfect. So, and that's exactly right. Your different brands are going to have different thinness to them. I don't know what there's a technical term for that besides that. But in addition, know your individual colors. When you work with them, some colors will naturally dry faster, get thicker faster. Whites tend to get chalkier and thicker faster than other colors. And so know how thick that paint is coming out of the bottle, even within one brand. Not all Game Airs, not all model colors or model airs or whatever, or anything has the same viscosity, I guess, maybe, right out of the pot or out of the bottle. So if we're talking about thinning, the next step would be, what do you thin with? Well, the easy and obvious answer is water. And that's why I prefer dropper bottles, because you can get your mix where you want it. I can say 2 drops of paint, 1 drop of water. How do I get 1 drop of water? Yes, this super amazing thing right here. This is a little medicine dropper that I keep next to me, and you can see it's actually about to drip a little drip of water out. I keep it on something so it doesn't drip all over my desk. And I got 2 of these for, I don't know, 99 cents at the grocery store. Wasn't really a big investment, but it lets me control exactly the amount I want to use. Problems with water. The problem with water is that paint isn't really mixed with water. I mean, there is some in there, but paint is an acrylic mixture, and it's pigment bonded to that acrylic mixture. And if you put in too much water, you will break up the paint, the molecules of paint, and it will lose its ability to actually stick to anything. It will become inconsistent. So
if you put this in practice, what basically what he's saying is, if you overthin your paint with water, what it's going to look like on a model is it's going to look like you took chalk of that color and sort of put it on the model. It's going to look very broken up. It's going to look very pasty because it was overthinned. So that's what in practice what overthinning would look like.
Yep. If you ever get your paint with water to the same consistency as water, like and the easy way to tell this is take a cup, put like a toothpick in it or the end of your paintbrush, and drag your water up the side of the cup. How much water actually comes up and stays behind? Not much, right? Because water tries to get back together, the bonds of it. So if it gets to that level of viscosity, you have thinned too far with just water, and you will not get any good results. So what if you need to thin paint a lot? I actually prefer something like this right here. This is Vallejo Glaze Medium. They also make gloss medium if you want to turn your paint glossy. That's what this will do. It'll thin it down, but also give it a gloss color. They also make a metallic medium, which is pretty cool. They make a crackle medium, which will make the paint do that, crackle. If you don't like Vallejo stuff, or because those bottles can be a little expensive, big giant bottle of airbrush medium will often do the same thing. There's Liquitex makes several different lines of this. I use this for my airbrush, but you can also make mixes of this for just regular paints and use it for regular painting. There's also just a straight thinner they make.
Yep. I have all those products that Vince just mentioned. And then if you're a little bit confused on what we're talking about in terms of glaze medium or the flat coat, basically, if you have a brush on sealer, something like Ard Coat from the Citadel range, right? That's what it's called now. You can actually use one of those as a paint thinner type deal. That will actually thin out the color a little bit. You can use
I think their Lamia medium is like their big one that people use a lot.
Okay. But I do know people who actually will use a sealer. So your hard coat or your flat coat or whatever sealer you use can actually be used as also as a thinning medium to kind of thin it out. But if you don't want to get glaze medium, I think glaze medium is one of the better things. Another thing I will use to help when I'm glazing a large area, I will actually take some of this. I make my own airbrush thinner, and that's part isopropyl alcohol. It's part of Flow-Aid, which is basically soap, and then a drying retarder. And what this does is your paint, when you start thinning it and when you get that heavy amount of water in there, what Vince was talking about is water has heavy surface tension, so it tends to bubble up. What the Flow-Aid and the drying retarder will do is let it kind of flow out along the actual surface and then dry that way, so that you won't get those weird bubbles and ripples in your glaze. You can just kind of pull it along the model surface, especially flat surfaces when you're glazing those. You want it to be very, very smooth. So sometimes something like that will help a whole lot.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I also have my trusty Flow-Aid. One quick note: if you do pick up this Flow-Aid, this is meant to be mixed. Like if you use this straight, it's going to be insane.
Oh yeah,
this is meant to be mixed 1 part this to 20 parts water. Don't miss that little direction on the back. So that is meant to be very diluted.
So what you can even do is put, you take your little water thing that you're going to droplet into paint or whatever, and just mix up, your water cup in with your Flow-Aid, and then have that sitting next to your desk with your dropper.
Yeah, exactly. Just some little bottles. Just some little bottles or something like that is really all you need. Just keep like I saw you had one. Here's my little simple bottle. I mean, you can get like a big pack of these. And I hope nobody out there listening thinks, oh my God, Vince and Paul are telling me I got to run out and spend a ton of money. Not
everything we just told you is probably $30.
Right. If you bought all of that, exactly. This bottle, if you buy this is a lifetime supply of this. If you paint
$10
as much as I do, and I paint a lot, you can see how much of this I've used. Look at how that is still that full, right? I mean, this stuff just doesn't go away. When you buy it once, it's an infinite supply, effectively. So, these aren't a lot individually, and when you buy them, you're generally buying them once, and you're using them in small amounts. What I will do. And so, I can't tell you a drop ratio because, again, the type of paint you use and the exact color, all that's going to change how many drops you need. So instead, I'm going to tell you this. If you're trying I work in paint layers that are really thin because I don't want any detail lost, and I want to slowly transition colors. So even when I'm base coating, I tend to be pretty thin. But so for a base coat, what I would say is get your paint to the point where when you drag it up the side of your palette or move it around or something like that, that it still runs and flows pretty easily. You want to be like, let's say 2% milk, okay, on that. And when you're glazing and doing your details and your highlights, you want to be at skim milk. And if you want to know what the consistency of skim milk is, just go get some skim milk out of your fridge and pour it in a glass and do that same thing I just mentioned. Drag it up the side, and you'll watch how it leaves it doesn't flow the same way as water does. There's a film sort of left behind. It is a thicker thing than water. And if you're working in that, when you work to that level, what you got to keep in mind is we're not talking about taking the fig, and touching it once and being done.
So I think that is the primo way that I always try to explain to people, right? Is that thickness, thinness, right? Sometimes that's hard to measure. You know, some people have a hard time figuring out this whole skim milk, thick milk kind of deal. Basically, what it should happen, unless you're absolutely base coating, and still this is very iffy depending on the person. But I'm not going to tell someone who's just painting to paint for fun not to do that. But you should almost never be able to cover an area. So if I have one color on there, right, and if I put another coat of paint across that, I should not be able to cover the previous coat of paint in one go. I should be able to see stuff through that paint layer onto the previous coat. So if I put down, a dark green and then I put a yellow over the top, I should be able to almost see right through that yellow. That should be damn near transparent, especially on that color transition. You should never be able to cover what you just did entirely with the next coat of paint. It should definitely be at least partially transparent.
Yep. Now, what the right thinness is for you, again, like Paul said, you got to find your own bliss with this, as it were. When you get it down really thin and you start working with like those mediums and those and flow weight and stuff, you can get your paint to like an outrageously thin level where you can pull unbelievable transitions if you're willing to sit there and do 20 or 25 glaze layers, right? And that's you're
starting to talk about Golden Demon layer right there, right? I mean, that's what
right.
The Golden Demon guys are doing. They're doing 20 to 50 layers on certain things. That's how they get those beautiful transitions. So,
yep. Your world, if you're just painting your army, probably doesn't need to go that far, and that's okay. But if you keep your paints thinner, if you use some of these tools we mentioned, I think you'll have a much better experience, especially when you do small things like faces and ridges and little pieces. You'll notice that you don't lose that detail because too much paint gets in a divot, and then the divot's gone, right? Because now it's full of paint. The other thing I would say was, if you're ever going to touch really tiny details, so this is a little Bretonnian horse I'm working on, and on their, I don't know, leather straps, right, they have these little bolts, right, these little screws. Whenever you're literally just touching paint to something, like that, you still need to have your paint thin, but you don't want to go all the way down to a glaze consistency for that dot, because you do need, like with a glaze, I need to be able to touch the fig and drag. I need to be able to move the paint around to make the color stick. And if I'm literally just touching the fig, so like for these teeniest of tiniest dots, you want to be up at more like the 2% milk layer. Like for that, I don't know if you do a similar thing, but when I do those, I just use like the model air, the game air straight out. So I don't actually thin it for those little dot touches.
Even dot touches, sometimes if I'm talking about ridging, if I'm talking about using the side of the brush to ridge something, I almost will use Reaper consistency just on a wet palette to just kind of very little amount of paint and use the actual amount of paint on my brush as a tool instead of the actual flowing. Because like you said, it's just, when it starts running, when you're trying to edge or touch something, it's you're very deleterious to the actual painting process. So
yes, and now I'm going to give, I think, my final tip on this, my final secret. The first time you do this, okay, if you really thin your paints, I know what's going to happen out there, YouTubers. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your big brush or some brush like this. You're going to put it in the paint, and then you're going to touch the model with this super thin watered down paint, and poof, paint is going to explode everywhere as you put that brush to that model. So here is the super secret to working with very thinned paints. Paint colors things. I know that sounds stupid, but like it doesn't take much. A little bit of paint will really dramatically change the color of something, right? So, and your brush has a belly in it. It's meant to hold paint inside. This is your secret weapon. You can see, what is it? You can see the corner of that thing, because every time I dip my brush in, right, the first thing I do is, this isn't post, this is pre-paint. I dip my brush in the color, and then very lightly, like this, just a paper towel, I just drag it across there to get excess off. And then if I, for real control, there you go, the old back of the thumb, right? Because you're holding the mini like this, and it both will get your brush to a good tip. It gets rid of any inconsistencies, brings that brush to a nice tip, you drag your brush just across your thumb like that. Brings your brush to a tip, brings the paint out of the belly up to there, gets rid of excess fluid, water, whatever. Now you're ready to have some good control with that brush.
Let me give you my absolute tip of the week. So the first way I started thinning paint and getting it thin, this is a small wet palette from Michaels. You can get this almost anywhere. You can get it off Amazon. This is very, very inexpensive. Make your own if you really, really want to. I think you're going to spend more money and waste more time doing it. You can get paper refills for this for like $10 or something silly. This is just a small wet palette, and I do almost exactly what Vince did. So what I did was I just take my Reaper dropper bottle, put it in there, take a drop, and then just wipe my brush right next to it on the wet palette. And what that does is simultaneously take some of the paint off and wets the paint. So you almost do both at once on the wet palette. And it saves you a ton of paint and a ton of time. And I think that if you were going to get one tool that we've mentioned so far, start with a wet palette. A wet palette is a thing of beauty. So just making sure you're only having a tiny bit on your brush and you're thinning those paints down.
Yeah. The thing about the wet palette too is you will get so much more life out of your paint, right? Yeah, it's you will be amazed at how long paint will stay usable on a wet palette. All right, very good. Anything else to say about thinning? Are we good?
I think we beat that dead horse.
Probably. I think honestly the scary part is we probably could go for another half hour talking about like really minutia detail of it, but there you go.
Yeah.
Thin your paints, folks.
It's really hard to get generic on it too, right? I mean, like you said, it's very specific, very dependent too. I mean, you go thinner for non-metallic metals, you go, heavier for certain other things,
Oh, thank you very much. That is an excellent point. Let me say that real quick. Thank God you said that. I would have felt like a total a-hole afterward. Metallic paints, you do not thin metallic paints with water.
Oh yeah, okay? Don't do that.
Do not thin metallic paints need to be thin. They should not be thin with water. If you do not, here's my, I'm not normally going to back brands. I'll normally say whatever you want, use what you want. The one exception to this is the Model Air and Game Air Vallejo metallics. Really, if you're painting metallics, you should own these paints. I cannot stand behind these enough. They cover, they are thinned so well. They take the Vallejo glaze medium perfectly when you want to do smooth metallic transitions. If I had one paint I would send to everybody in America who paints, it would be these paints. I swear to God, they will change your life. That is the bottom line. I would
not far off.
Yeah. I'm sorry if you like bolt gun metal and stuff like that, but anything else, even the normal Vallejo metallics, are just junk compared to the Model Air and the Game Air metallic. The coverage, the consistency, it's a whole different world. But whatever you use, don't use water. So if you're going to thin metallics, and you should, that's when you really need to bring in your glaze.
So if you want the quick down and dirty, basically what happens with the metallics is there's heavier pigment in there, right? There's metallic flakes for pigment. And in a Game Air or a Model Air, they had to grind those pigments much finer so they go through an airbrush. And what that does is gives you this nice, flat, beautiful paint for metallics. So really, it's just a higher quality metallic paint when you're talking about an airbrush metallic.
Yep, exactly. They take that. Most metallics are made with like aluminum or something like that, mica, and they take them and it's ground to exactly what you said, this unbelievably fine level. So, yep. All right, rock and roll. Okay. So I believe that brings our painting tip section to the end. So all we need to do is set up next week's challenge, or next 2 weeks challenge, whatever. The next challenge.
We'll get it eventually.
Yes. So I believe we had 10 items here. I've got it up. There we go. We had done faces last time, and we replaced faces with painting pure white. Pure white is a real stickler to paint. So, just as last time, I thought we would do the same thing. Just roll a quick D10, and we'll determine what we're doing for our next bi-weekly challenge. And we encourage you to participate as well. All right, here we go. The dice is, here you go. Standard trusty orange D10, no waiting, no tricks. Didn't put it in the microwave or anything. Oh, all right, now there you go, my hand. Oh, it's very clear. Look at that. 10.
What do we got? 10? Oh Lord, was it 10?
There you go. 10 is the number.
Oh, right.
All right, what is number 10? There we go. Number 10 is After Effects, Gore and Blood. Oh, that's a fun one.
Oh, there we go.
I'm excited about that one. So for 2 weeks, tune in, and we're gonna see some. There will be blood. So maybe I'll get the miniature of a guy drinking someone's milkshake. Yeah, I like it.
So I'll give you all a pre-hint. There will likely be a lot of this involved.
Nice.
And you'll have to tune in next time to see what we end up with that. But should be a lot of fun. I'm excited to pick out a miniature.
Oh yeah, I think my Bretonians are probably not going to be the choice for this one.
I don't think so. Actually, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I have a friend with a Tyranid army, so we'll see.
All right, so I had a couple questions here that came in through the show from people watching, so I wanted to address those real quick. Nick Fensky said hi. Hey, Nick, thanks for watching. Always good to see you, bud. William Page said his solution to faces is to only use helmeted models. I'm trying that with the Bretonian army, dude, and let me tell you what, it's great. You know, just metal up here is wonderful. And Matiram said, question, how would you recommend doing a character who is using lipstick? Would you still mix in the flesh tone? I'm thinking of doing a new female vamp for my VC army, and he wants the blood red. That's a great question. So lipstick does obviously make your lips look very red. I would still absolutely recommend mixing in the flesh tone. What you're going to want to do, lipstick has, so it depends how far you want to take this material. Let me say this. Here's how I've done lipstick on the 1 or 2 models that I painted lipstick on. You want to do the same thing. You start by painting normal lips. Take a pinkish, ruddy hue, flesh tone it out, and you glaze up some lips. Okay. Then what you do is you just deepen out into more of, you want to go into the pink red, like the darker pink purple red. And you want to transition toward the center of the mouth. Like I have my mustache in the way, but that line that I'm pointing at is darker, right, than this. If you look at the edge of my lips, you can see where the flesh tone is fades, right? And the other trick to lipstick is that lipstick is generally shiny and glossy. So what you can then do is transition back into like a pure pink up to a pink or white at the center of the lips where it would be caught here and here. Hopefully your female fig doesn't have a mustache so you could more easily see the ridge line. And that color transition of the deep red here and then the pinky up lines. Honestly, think of how I did that Cosmonaut fig. Going from like pink to a pink white up there would make it look reflective. You're almost pulling a non-metallic metal to fake reflection on the lips. That would be my advice. Paul, what are your thoughts?
So I would probably do something similar. I think what I would likely do is emphasize one lip over the other. It's very likely I would spend a little bit thicker red on the bottom lip as opposed to the top lip. Usually your bottom lip is more pronounced. And I definitely would keep the flesh tones to the side and then the red more towards the bottom. What I might do with this is just take the normal flesh tone I might do and do a heavier red wash and then possibly line the bottom lip towards the center with my lipstick color. I think at that point, depending on how large we're talking about, if you're talking about the normal 28 mil or a 20 mil Warhammer figure, I think the face might be a little bit smaller for anything. It might be a little too small for anything else to even stand out. So that's probably where I would go. Normal lip flesh tones, and then a heavier red wash, and then pick out the bottom lip towards the center of the mouth with the red. It's
a great piece of advice. In general with lips, you always want to focus on the bottom lip. most people's top lips are very unpronounced. You can barely see it at all. So yes, always, like, that's just good advice in general. And so thank you. That's excellent, Paul. Yeah, absolutely good point. Always bottom lip focus. Often when you're doing, like, if you're going to red out lips, you don't even want to touch red, or just take a much lighter glazing series to the top lip, right? It should be more flesh tone. All right, good question. Hopefully that helps, Materim. I would say, remember, pink red, not orange red, because red can have, can go either of those directions. If you can't tell the difference, have Alicia pick one out for you that matches that for what red is right. And also on the bright side, I would just Google image search some models who have big full lips and have pink, and then if somebody asks you what you're doing, you can be like, look, I'm just doing research. That's why I'm looking at models on the internet. Okay, this is important research being done here. So you got that going for you, and that's pretty nice. All right. Very good. I don't have anything else. Paul, any closing thoughts here?
So any closing thoughts? Please look forward to the video I'm going to put forward on how I painted my guy, and please let us know which one you like more. I know we're not going to get a bajillion responses, but if we're going to go one way or the other, if we're going to go the uneasy route, I would like to know that it's actually beneficial for some people. So please look forward to that. And then if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and Vince's channel. We'll be doing these again bi-weekly, so as often as life will allow. And then we'll put a link below to an email where you can send any pictures or any comments, or if Vince wants to take over the email this time, he can post his email. And again, we'd be happy to have you on, and questions and comments are always appreciated. So hope you enjoyed.
That's right. Very good. There'll be links to both channels. Like you said, subscribe, like if you like it. Gore and Blood is what's coming up. So hopefully we'll see you then in 2 weeks.
And if you got Gore and Blood coming on your minis, make sure to send us some pictures, man. We'd love to go over some different stuff.
Absolutely. All right, folks. See you next time.